They hit me with a $30,000 fine for a cabin that wasn't even on HOA property. When I proved it, things took a turn I'll never forget. Picture this. I'm in my hand-built cedar cabin, morning coffee steaming in the crisp mountain air, holding a stack of legal documents that's about to flip my neighborhood upside down. The scent of fresh sawdust from my last bit of trim work still hung in the air, mingling with pine needles crunching under my boots. That outrageous fine notice sat right there on my kitchen counter, demanding $30,000 for an unauthorized structure built 847 feet outside their jurisdiction. What they didn't realize was how much I knew about property lines, overreaching HOA boards, and what happens when you push a retired electrician with nothing left to lose. What would you do if your HOA tried to fine you for something sitting squarely on your own land? And while we're at it, where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I'm betting you've got your own HOA stories. My name's Garrett Steele. 2 years ago, I thought my retirement was set. I was 52, had spent 30 years as a union electrician, and had a modest savings that would let me enjoy my golden years tinkering in the workshop while my wife Melody cheered me on from the kitchen window. But life had other plans. When Melody passed from cancer, I found myself wandering through our home in Pine Ridge Estates like a marble rattling inside an empty coffee can. The HOA-approved beige walls felt like they were closing in, and every perfectly manicured lawn reminded me of projects we'd never finished together. That's when I remembered Uncle Ray's 40-acre plot up in the Colorado foothills, a quiet slice of wilderness he'd left me that I'd hardly visited since his funeral. The land was about 300 yards beyond the last HOA street sign, where neat suburbia gave way to real pine trees and deer trails. Standing there that first morning, breathing in the sharp scent of mountain air mixed with fallen leaves, hearing the low rumble of my diesel generator warming up, I knew exactly what I needed to build. A small cabin. Nothing fancy, just a place where a man could drink coffee without someone measuring his grass. After 30 years in the trade, I knew one rule above all: always pull the proper permits. I'd seen too many weekend builders get in trouble skipping that step. So I went straight to the county office, filed for structural, electrical, and septic permits. Cost me an extra $300, but those little yellow slips would prove my 600-square-foot cabin was as legal as Sunday morning. That's when Vivian Hartwell stepped into the picture. She's the type who leads with her HOA title, like royalty. HOA. Board President Vivian Hartwell, she'd announce, standing stiff in designer pantsuits that probably cost more than my monthly pension. At 58, she had the posture of someone who'd spent decades in corporate HR, and the kind of polished smile you learn in seminars about managing difficult people. She ruled our 5-person HOA board like it was her own kingdom. Every mailbox, forest green, every fence exactly 6 feet, every flower bed pre-approved. She even carried a measuring tape in her purse. Vivian had perfected what I call corporate condescension, that tone where "have a blessed day" somehow sounds like a warning. She'd smile while making little comments about maintaining standards, but her eyes told a different story about blue-collar retirees who didn't fit her mold. The day everything shifted, I was wrestling with a window frame when I heard the crunch of expensive tires on gravel. Vivian's spotless white Lexus stopped at my property line, and out she stepped in heels that immediately sank into the forest floor. "Mr. Steele," she called sweetly, picking her way toward me, "I hope you've cleared this little project with the proper authorities." I pointed to my bright yellow permit nailed to a pine tree. "County says it's legal, ma'am." Her smile twitched, barely, but I caught it. Well, county permits are one thing. HOA approval is another. That should have been my first warning, but I figured any reasonable person would know HOA rules stopped at the street signs. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. $30,000 fine for a cabin on land older than her precious HOA. Sitting on my half-finished porch, cold coffee in hand, I read the last line. "Ignorance of our covenants is no excuse." That's when I realized bullies count on you being too tired to fight. They guessed wrong. The next morning, I called Vivian. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is Garrett Steele. About that letter, there's been a misunderstanding. The property's outside. HOA boundaries." Silence, paper shuffling. Then that same syrupy voice. "Mr. Steele, our jurisdiction covers all member properties regardless of location. The covenants are clear. With respect, I have county permits. I'm sure you do, but our legal counsel has reviewed it. The fine stands. Good day." Click. I stared at my phone, wondering if I'd fallen into a world where property lines were just suggestions. The smell of burnt coffee pulled me back. Within a week, Vivian launched a campaign straight out of a strategy manual. First came a complaint to county enforcement claiming I was running an unpermitted rental using my own permits against me. Then came the gossip. At the grocery store, I'd hear whispers. "Poor man's not thinking straight since his wife passed." Small-town talk can feel like living in a fishbowl full of piranhas. Her masterstroke was recruiting other homeowners as her personal watch team. Every time I drove toward the mountain, someone would appear from behind hedges, phone in hand. Lumber. Deliveries? People popped out from trees snapping photos like I was rare wildlife. The breaking point came when she knocked on my front door, clipboard in hand, smile sharp as ever. "Garrett," she began warmly, "I've been thinking about our little situation. If you stop construction now and remove the structure, we might reduce the fine to a more manageable $5,000 for administrative inconvenience." I looked at her standing there, offering to graciously reduce her own invented penalty. The fine was almost entirely fabricated, about 83% pure fiction, and something inside me shifted. You know that moment when it hits you someone thinks you're gullible enough to fall for their scheme? That faint metallic taste when your blood, pressure spikes, ears buzzing like static? "Mrs. Hartwell," I said slowly, "I think it's time I did some digging of my own." Her smile flickered, just for a moment, like a light bulb with loose wiring. Digging into property records, survey maps, maybe even those original HOA documents you keep mentioning. That Tuesday morning found me at the Jefferson County Courthouse, fueled by black coffee and sheer determination. 30 years of dealing with building inspectors had taught me one important thing: paperwork might move slowly, but it never lies. Every boundary, easement, and covenant leaves a record you can follow like a trail of breadcrumbs. The first surprise came with the original Pine Ridge Estates Incorporation documents. Turns out HOA boundaries aren't casual agreements. They're legally defined, mapped, and filed with the county clerk when the association is formed. The second surprise? My Uncle Ray's 40 acres had been deeded and recorded 15 years before Pine Ridge Estates even existed. In legal terms, it was grandfathered, property rights that can't be overridden by later agreements, no matter how impressive the HOA letterhead. The real jackpot, though, was buried in the HOA's own covenant paperwork. Section 12C, subsection 4, stated in pristine legal language that the HOA's authority extended only to properties within the platted boundaries recorded on March 15, 2008. Sitting in that courthouse basement, surrounded by the musty smell of paper and the hum of fluorescent lights, I read that section 3 times. My cabin wasn't just outside their jurisdiction, it was legally untouchable. Time to bring in a professional. Rex Morrison came recommended by the county clerk, a man who didn't tolerate nonsense and knew property law like most people know, their own backyard. At 62, with skin like weathered leather, he looked every bit the man who'd spent decades in standoffs with property lines. "Let me guess," Rex said, adjusting his worn baseball cap as I explained. "HOA thinks anything they can see from their street signs is theirs?" "Something like that," I replied. Rex chuckled while setting up his survey gear, morning mist curling around it like the ghosts of old disputes. "Son, I've seen this before. Satellites don't lie. Neither does old-fashioned measuring." 3 hours later, the verdict was in, 847 feet. My cabin sat exactly 847 feet outside Pine Ridge Estate's legal boundary. I sent certified copies of the survey to every board member, along with a polite request to withdraw the fine and issue an apology. Vivian's reply arrived in 48 hours. Surveyor error. Fine stands. Pay now or face property lien. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about control. She was willing to drag me through the mud rather than admit she was wrong. A lien on my home. Wasn't like the fine. A fine was just money. A lien threatened my house, my equity, everything Melody and I had built together. She escalated again. 1 week later, a sleek black sedan rolled into my driveway. Out stepped a man in a tailored $1,000 suit, carrying a leather briefcase worth more than my monthly groceries. Behind him came Vivian, clutching a manila folder thick enough to stop a door. "Mr. Steele," the suit said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm attorney Richard Blackwell of Blackwell, Morrison and Associates. We represent Pine Ridge Estates." Sure, I knew the firm's reputation. They specialized in community governance disputes, which is just lawyer speak for crushing homeowners who push back. Their billboards along Highway 6 featured smiling attorneys in front of gates with slogans like "Protecting your investment and community standards matter." "We're here to discuss your situation," Blackwell continued, snapping open his briefcase, with dramatic flair. Vivian watched with faux concern as he slid a 23-page cease and desist order across my table. All those whereas and heretofore clauses boiled down to one thing: stop building, or we'll make your life miserable. And here's where Vivian made her first real mistake. She got greedy. While Blackwell droned on about community harmony, Vivian wandered off on her own mini-inspection tour. Through my kitchen window, I saw her measure my fence setback, snap photos of my mailbox, and, no joke, count the decorative rocks. In my flower bed, that's when it clicked. She wasn't just after the cabin. She was hunting for anything she could label a violation. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. Mailbox 2.3 inches too close to the sidewalk, $500 fine. Fence stain, weathered beyond standards, $750 fine. My truck parked in my own driveway for 8 years, now classified as a commercial vehicle, won $200 fine. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, feeling like I was sinking in bureaucratic quicksand. Even the smell of fresh coffee couldn't cover the bitter taste of what was happening. That's when I remembered something my old union steward always said. When management brings out fancy lawyers, it's time to learn their rule book. So back. To the courthouse I went, this time looking for ammunition. 3 days of combing through public records taught me something interesting. HOAs in Colorado have to file annual reports with the Secretary of State, including full financial statements. Pine Ridge Estates collected about $180,000 a year in dues and fees, but their expenses told a different story. $45,000 of that went to legal fees alone. That's 25% of their budget for a community where the biggest drama was usually Christmas lights. The real gem was buried in the vendor list. Blackwell, Morrison and Associates had been paid $67,000 over the past 18 months, supposedly for covenant enforcement. That was about $3,700 a month in legal fees for a neighborhood where the hottest debate was usually about lawn fertilizer. Either Pine Ridge Estates was the most lawsuit-prone subdivision in Colorado, or someone was getting far too comfortable spending other people's money on intimidation. I decided to test a theory. That evening, I went door to door with one simple question. "Have you ever gotten a legal threat from our HOA?" The answers floored me. Martha Henderson had been fined $800 for planting roses instead of the approved marigolds. Bob Schmidt had been hit with a $1,500 penalty for a satellite dish visually disruptive to the community. Jennifer Walsh had received a cease and desist for running a home-based accounting business. Every single one of these violations had triggered expensive legal letters from Blackwell's firm, and every homeowner had paid rather than fight. The pattern was obvious. Vivian had turned HOA enforcement into a revenue machine, with Blackwell acting as her personal collection arm. What she didn't realize? I was retired, angry, and had nothing but time. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, requesting a full audit of Pine Ridge Estates' finances. I also mailed every homeowner a certified letter outlining the HOA's legal spending and asking some very pointed questions. Vivian's reply was swift. Another certified letter, this time threatening defamation charges for false and malicious statements about the HOA. But her tone felt different. Not intimidating, defensive. She was rattled, and we both knew it. But rattled people in power rarely back down. They dig in. Her next move was an emergency community meeting notice, slid under every door. The subject line read, "Urgent safety concerns regarding rogue member actions." The meeting agenda made my blood pressure spike. Discussion of harassment and defamation. Special assessment to fund legal defense. Suspension of membership. Privileges for community disruption. Translation: paint me as a dangerous troublemaker, get the community to fund her legal war chest, and kick me out of the HOA, while still pretending to have authority over my cabin. I spent 3 days preparing for that meeting like it was a trial. Rex Morrison, my surveyor, helped me build a visual presentation, aerial photos, official maps, and copies of the HOA's financial reports, all printed on large foam boards visible from the back row. Thursday evening arrived gray and damp, that steady Colorado mist making the air smell like wet pine. The community center buzzed with tension. I could spot the divide, Vivian's loyalists up front, the curious and concerned in the back clutching my letter about the HOA's spending. Vivian opened the meeting in her most authoritative navy blazer, wearing a smile that could freeze coffee. "Thank you all for attending. We're here to address serious concerns about a member disrupting community harmony with harassment and false accusations," she said, gesturing toward me like I was a hazard in need of removal. "Mr. Steele has been spreading misinformation about our finances, apparently in retaliation for legitimate enforcement actions. Tonight, we must decide how to protect our community." That's when I stood, boards in hand, and asked the question that changed the tone of the night. "Mrs. Hartwell, before we talk about my alleged harassment, could you explain exactly where the HOA's legal authority begins and ends?" Her confidence wavered. "Our authority extends to all member properties, as stated in our covenants." I walked to the front, unfolded my first board, and pointed to an aerial map of Pine Ridge Estates boundaries, highlighted in red. "According to Jefferson County records, our jurisdiction ends here at Granite Ridge Road. My cabin is here, 847 feet outside." The murmurs started. Martha Henderson raised her hand. "If his cabin is outside, why are we fining him?" Vivian slipped into her condescending tone. "Property boundaries are more complex than simple survey lines. Our covenants, no," came a voice from the back. Rex had arrived, still in his work clothes, carrying a rolled document. "Boundaries aren't complex. They're defined, surveyed, and recorded. And this cabin sits on land that predates your HOA by 15 years. The room erupted. Rex spread out an official county survey on the table, and homeowners crowded in, pointing and asking questions. Vivian froze. Then Bob Schmidt asked the question that broke it open. "If we've spent $67,000 on legal fees chasing a claim you can't win, what other enforcement has been questionable?" The floodgates opened. Jennifer's business restriction that didn't exist in the original covenants, Tom Bradley's fence height dispute that contradicted county code, Maria Santos's mailbox color demand not found in any document. Every one had cost homeowners money in legal fees. The pattern was undeniable. Vivian had been manufacturing violations. "This is absurd," Vivian finally snapped, her polished mask cracking. "You don't understand how hard it is to maintain standards when dealing with ungrateful homeowners questioning every decision. These legal fees are necessary to protect your property values." The room went silent. In that pause, everyone saw her clearly, not as a neighbor, but as a ruler guarding her personal fiefdom. Rex's voice cut through like a knife. "Ma'am, protecting property values doesn't require breaking property. Rights don't include draining other people's wallets with fake lawsuits," and that's when I pulled out my final card. "Speaking of spending other people's money," I said, unfolding my last display board, "let's talk about the $23,000 raised for playground upgrades. That still doesn't exist." Vivian's face turned pale. The room shifted into that charged silence right before a storm breaks, everyone knowing something big is coming. "That fund is in reserve pending contractor negotiations," she stammered, her voice stripped of its usual commanding edge. It sounded flat, rehearsed, like an excuse practiced in the mirror. "For 3 years?" Bob Schmidt shouted from the back. "My kids were in kindergarten when that fund started. Now, they're in middle school." That's when the most unlikely ally stepped forward. Josephine Carter, 78 years old, barely 5 feet tall, shuffling to the front with a worn cardboard box that looked like it had lived through half a dozen garage sales. "Mrs. Hartwell," Josephine began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd lived through tougher times than HOA politics. "I think it's time we discussed my late husband's files." The air went still. Even the heating system seemed to stop. "Harold was HOA treasurer for 12 years before his stroke," she continued, setting the box down with a thud that echoed like a gavel. "He kept everything: bank statements, receipts, meeting minutes, correspondence, all neatly dated and cross-referenced." Vivian's face shifted from pale to a sickly green. "Mrs. Carter, I don't think private financial records are—" "These aren't private," Josephine cut in, opening the lid slowly, like diffusing a bomb. "Harold believed HOA finances should be as clear as glass. Every year he sent copies to the State Oversight Board, just like the law says." She pulled out a thick folder labeled Discrepancies 2019-2022 in Harold's neat handwriting. Harold spotted problems before his stroke: missing receipts, unexplained expenses, payments to vendors who never did the work. He was going to raise it at the 2022 meeting. She dropped the folder on the table with a smack that made people jump. "But then his stroke happened, and you, Mrs. Hartwell, kindly stepped in to cover his duties. Very generous, very convenient." I saw Vivian's hands tremble as Josephine spread out Harold's records: checks written to phantom contractors, invoices for legal services triple the going rate, payments to Pine Ridge Property Management LLC, a business Harold found existed only on paper, at Vivian's home address. "Harold spent his final months trying to reconcile these," Josephine said, her calm voice commanding total focus. "He calculated about $47,000 in questionable spending over 3 years. That's money meant for maintenance, snow removal, and community improvements." "That's false," Vivian blurted, her voice cracking. "Harold was confused." "My husband's mind was sharp until the day he died," Josephine shot back. "Are you suggesting 40 years of accounting expertise vanished overnight from a minor stroke?" Rex Morrison leaned over the documents. "Ma'am, these records show a pattern. This isn't confusion. This is deliberate manipulation." Suddenly, the puzzle pieces locked into place in my mind. The bogus fine for my cabin wasn't about rules or property values. It was to keep a cash flow going, to cover money already missing. Fake violations, inflated legal bills, special assessments, all part of replacing what had been siphoned away. Vivian wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a financial scheme disguised as one. and my refusal to pay that $30,000 had threatened to blow it open. The question now, Josephine said, shutting the folder with finality, is what we're going to do about it. I realized this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. This was about justice for an entire community. The war was only starting, but now I had an army. The meeting ended with Vivian storming out, muttering about malicious accusations, while half the room buzzed in outrage over stolen money and broken trust. The other half sat in stunned silence. Josephine, bless her heart, invited everyone serious about action to her home the next night. "I'll make coffee," she said in that no-nonsense voice that probably ran PTA meetings like clockwork. 23. Homeowners showed up, turning her cozy living room into mission control for what Rex dubbed Operation Accountability. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the quiet determination of people who'd had enough. Rex brought in backup. His friend Benjamin Cross, a retired attorney with decades in HOA law and zero tolerance for corruption. "First things first," Ben said, laying out legal documents like a general planning a battle. "From what I see, Mrs. Hartwell may have committed multiple crimes: embezzlement, fraud, breach of duty. The good news? Financial crimes leave paper trails. Every fake invoice, every forged check, it's all evidence." Martha Henderson raised her hand. "What about those bogus fines she's been giving us? Illegal too?" "Absolutely," Ben replied, clearly enjoying the question. "An HOA can only enforce rules that actually exist in your official agreements. Making up violations for profit? That's fraud, plain and simple." That's when I learned something every homeowner should know. An HOA is a corporation, subject to the same oversight as any other. They can't just invent rules and demand money, no more than a grocery store can bill you rent for shopping there. Rex opened his laptop. "Let's start building our evidence inventory. Harold's records, survey maps." We'd already proven the cabin jurisdiction issue and uncovered patterns of questionable enforcement, but that was just the beginning. Jennifer Walsh, the home business owner who'd been unfairly targeted, volunteered to go door to door in Pine Ridge Estates, gathering records of every suspicious fine and violation notice from the last 3 years. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right," she said, with the conviction of someone who'd waited years for justice. Bob Schmidt stepped up with his photography skills, capturing images of each alleged violation Vivian had listed, most of which turned out to be either non-existent or based on made-up standards. Tom Bradley, a retired IRS auditor, offered to review every HOA expense against actual improvements in the neighborhood. The plan we crafted was simple but powerful. File complaints with 3 agencies at the same time: the Colorado Secretary of State for corporate misconduct, the Jefferson County District Attorney for suspected financial crimes, and the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies for HOA violations. Meanwhile, Ben would prepare a civil case to recover funds and damages. "The key," Ben explained as Josephine topped off coffee cups, "is coordination. We hit them from multiple angles at once so they can't put all their legal resources into one defense." Our biggest advantage, though, was something Vivian had never counted on: community unity. Tom's accounting skills meant our financial case would be solid. Jennifer's organizational abilities would ensure every resident's story was recorded. Rex's surveying expertise would settle property line disputes before they began. And Josephine, she became the heart of it all, a reminder that this wasn't just about money. It was about the principle that neighbors shouldn't exploit neighbors, and positions of trust shouldn't be abused. The most satisfying part of that meeting came when Rex suggested installing security cameras on all our properties. If she's willing to take $47,000, he warned, she might try intimidation or property damage. He was right. Just 3 days later, while I was finishing my cabin's front porch, breathing in the smell of fresh wood stain and the rhythmic sound of my hammer, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel. My new security camera caught a figure in dark clothing trying to damage my generator with a crowbar. The expensive hiking boots gave it away. Vivian had escalated from legal pressure to physical sabotage. But unlike her past targets, I was ready. The footage went straight to the sheriff, with copies to our attorney and the DA's office. Within 24 hours, she faced charges for vandalism and trespassing. More importantly, the rally that followed showed her influence was crumbling. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for years began speaking up, telling stories of harassment and bogus fines. The tables had turned. The charges shook her carefully built image. By the end of that day, news had spread through Pine Ridge faster than a summer wildfire. The same woman who'd lectured everyone on community standards had been caught damaging property like any other offender. But instead of backing down, Vivian fought harder, desperate to hold on to control. Her first move was hiring a crisis PR firm. Yes, those exist for HOA officials in trouble. Within 2 days, glossy flyers appeared on car windshields around the neighborhood. They painted me as an unstable widower, harassing board members and threatening safety, complete with bullet points and fake quotes. It was pure image manipulation. Then came the social media push. Fake accounts popped up in local groups, hinting at my erratic behavior without crossing legal lines. One of them, Sarah Johnson, was exposed by Rex's daughter, who tagged him in a post. A reverse image search revealed the profile picture was a stock model from Nebraska. "She's trying to control the story before our evidence goes public," Ben said at Josephine's kitchen table. "It's a classic move. Discredit the source before the truth gets out." That's when Tom dropped the bombshell. His forensic review showed the fake Pine Ridge Property Management LLC wasn't just a side hustle for Vivian. It was tied to shell companies and back-channel payments with certain contractors, law firms, and even county connections. Every major HOA contract for the last 3 years, snow removal, lawn care, general maintenance, had been inflated 30–40% to funnel extra cash. What we thought was $47,000 missing was actually closer to $180,000 in systematic overbilling. Jennifer's canvassing also uncovered a bigger picture. At least 3 other HOAs in Jefferson County had the same pattern of inflated fees, bogus, violations, and unexplained expenses, all tied to the same network. "This isn't one corrupt HOA," Ben said grimly. "This is organized fraud across multiple communities. This is going federal." Then Vivian played her boldest card yet. On Friday evening, notices appeared under every door calling for an emergency meeting to approve a special assessment, $2,500 per household, payable immediately, to fund legal defense against harassment lawsuits. The meeting was set for Monday night, barely enough time for anyone to react. But this time, the neighborhood was awake. Instead of panicking, people started asking the real question: why did we need $300,000 to fight claims if everything was frivolous? Complaints that came backed with solid proof started surfacing. The email chain that followed was a masterpiece in motion. Martha Henderson kicked it off with a single pointed question: has anyone actually seen evidence that Mr. Steele's complaints are baseless? Within hours, 23 homeowners replied with their own stories: unfair fines, excessive fees, and suspicious dealings with certain contractors. By Sunday night, it was obvious. Vivian's emergency assessment was doomed. Not only would it be voted down, but the very meeting she called had become the perfect stage for exposing our evidence to the entire community. Then she played her most desperate card yet. An anonymous tip to Child Protective Services claimed my unstable mental state and obsessive behavior made me a threat to children in the neighborhood. The report accused me of stalking families and making threats, creating an unsafe environment for minors. It was a calculated piece of malicious fiction designed to trigger a long investigation, ruin my reputation, and tie me up in bureaucratic chaos for months. But like every one of Vivian's schemes, it was built on lies that couldn't survive. Real scrutiny. and scrutiny was something we'd become experts at. The CPS case lasted exactly 4 hours. The investigator, Janet Sullivan, looked like she'd been through 2 decades of neighborhood feuds. She showed up Tuesday morning with the weary tone of someone handling her 3rd false report that week. "Mr. Steele, I'm here regarding a report about potential child safety issues in your neighborhood." I invited her in for coffee and laid everything out. The HOA corruption, fake fines, Vivian's escalating desperation, and our community's push to uncover systematic theft. She took notes as I showed security footage of Vivian vandalizing my property, Harold Carter's financial records, and documented patterns of fake violations. "Let me guess," Janet said after reviewing it all. "The person who filed this is the same one facing possible criminal charges for embezzlement." That would be correct. She shut her notebook with a snap that sounded like a judge's gavel. "Mr. Steele, in my experience, people who steal from their neighbors don't usually care about child safety. Consider this case closed." But her visit sparked something I hadn't anticipated. Media attention. Apparently, false CPS reports filed as retaliation for exposing HOA corruption made for good human interest news. By Thursday morning, Denver, Channel 7 was calling, asking if I'd appear on their weekend investigative segment about HOA abuse. That's when Vivian made her fatal mistake. Instead of lying low during the criminal probe, she went full blaze, announcing her own press conference for Friday afternoon at the Pine Ridge Estates Community Center to address malicious rumors and defend community integrity. She really thought she could spin the narrative through sheer force of will. Rex Morrison and I arrived early to find her setting up a podium, printed talking points, and even a professionally prepared slideshow about maintaining property values through strong governance. Folding chairs were arranged in perfect rows, as if this was a corporate meeting instead of a damage control session. "This should be interesting," Rex muttered as we watched her rehearse in front of a mirror propped against the wall. The media. Turnout exceeded all expectations. Channel 7's investigative team, the Denver Post's community affairs reporter, and even the weekly Jefferson County Journal. But the real shock was the crowd. Nearly 80 homeowners packed the place, many holding violation notices and copies of Harold Carter's financial files. Vivian opened with confidence, reading about her years of dedicated volunteer service and how she was protecting the community from frivolous attacks. She painted me as a vengeful neighbor driven by grief and mental instability. The first crack came when Channel 7's reporter asked, "Mrs. Hartwell, can you explain why the HOA paid $23,000 to a management company registered at your home address?" Her smile faltered. "Those are complex arrangements, not appropriate for this forum." "What about the playground fund?" shouted Bob Schmidt from the crowd. "Financial details are confidential board matters," she snapped, her composure slipping. Then Josephine Carter stood up, clutching Harold's folder like a weapon. "Mrs. Hartwell, nothing about HOA finances should be hidden from the people paying for them." The room erupted, dozens shouting about fines, legal fees, and missing funds. Vivian tried to control it, but you can't calm 78 furious neighbors with corporate jargon. The knockout blow came when Jennifer Walsh asked, "If Mr. Steele's complaints are so frivolous, why did you try to vandalize his property with a crowbar?" Dead silence. Vivian's face shifted from confusion to rage. "That's completely false. This meeting is a setup by people trying to destroy community governance." The cameras caught it all as she accused residents of conspiracy, demanded the press leave, threatened lawsuits, and finally stormed toward the exit, only to be met by Sheriff's Deputy Martinez holding an arrest warrant for grand theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The cameras rolled as she was handcuffed and led away, screaming about being framed. Justice had arrived, with handcuffs and live coverage. The arrest footage went viral within hours. By Saturday, HOA president arrested for embezzlement was trending statewide, and news outlets from California to Florida had picked up the story. But that was only the opening act. The real finale came Tuesday at an emergency HOA meeting about what the county prosecutor now called systematic financial fraud across multiple communities. The Pine Ridge Estates Community Center overflowed with cars, news vans, and curious onlookers. Inside, every seat was taken, with people standing shoulder to shoulder along the walls. Sheriff's deputies, the Colorado Secretary of State's office, and the FBI's white-collar crime unit were all there. Investigators revealed our neighborhood had exposed a multi-jurisdictional conspiracy involving HOA corruption, contractor fraud, and money laundering. The meeting opened with Benjamin Cross projecting Harold Carter's meticulously organized financial records onto large screens, bank statements showing payments to fake companies, forged signatures on HOA checks, and proof of $180,000 stolen over 3 years. The speaker addressed the silent crowd. What we're looking at here isn't just mismanagement. This is a coordinated fraud that turned your homeowners association into a criminal operation. Gasps rippled through the audience, a collective realization of just how deeply they'd been deceived. Martha Henderson's tears began to fall as she understood that her so-called Rose Garden fine had paid for Vivian's luxury vacation in the Bahamas. Bob Schmidt's face flushed red with anger as he mentally tallied the bogus violations his family had paid over the years. But the real shock came when Rex Morrison unveiled his investigation into the wider web of corruption. With public records and financial documents in hand, he traced the links between Vivian's scheme and similar scams in 4 other Colorado communities. Pine Ridge Estates wasn't alone, Rex explained, pointing to a chart mapping money flows through shell companies and inflated contractor payments. This was part of an organized effort systematically draining homeowners' money across Jefferson County. Then FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres stepped forward. At 45, she carried the calm authority of someone who had spent 2 decades making white-collar criminals uncomfortable. Based on the evidence your community uncovered, Agent Torres announced, we've opened a federal case involving racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy charges that go far beyond this neighborhood. This morning, we executed search warrants at 17 locations and arrested 6 individuals connected to this operation. The room buzzed with disbelief. Their local HOA fight had just exposed a federal crime ring worth millions. But the most powerful moment came when Josephine Carter, at 78 years old, took the microphone. Harold always said democracy works when good people stand up to bullies, she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. For 3 years, we let fear silence us while our community was robbed. But this week proved that when neighbors unite, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. The votes that followed were almost routine after such an emotional moment. Vivian and the entire corrupt board were unanimously removed. Emergency elections were set for the next month. All bogus fines and fees were voided, with a promise that recovered funds would be returned to homeowners. The community also adopted what they called the Pine Ridge Transparency Covenant, rules requiring monthly financial reports, open book audits, and homeowner approval for any legal spending over $500. My personal vindication came when the new interim board president, elected on the spot, announced, the $30,000 fine against Garrett Steele is hereby voided, along with our formal apology for the harassment and illegal enforcement actions taken by the previous administration. The applause was great, but my real satisfaction came later, walking out into the crisp mountain air scented with pine and approaching snow, knowing that my cabin project had become a symbol of what happens when ordinary people refuse to be bullied. 6 months later, Vivian Hartwell was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for racketeering, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The judge summed it up perfectly. The defendant violated the trust of the community, turning a position of service into an opportunity for personal gain. The investigation recovered $2.3 million across 5 HOA communities, with Pine Ridge estates receiving $247,000 in restitution, more than we'd imagined. It turned out Vivian's network had been even more elaborate, involving fake maintenance contracts, inflated insurance policies, and kickbacks going back nearly a decade. But the real victory wasn't just in the money. Our neighborhood came alive again. The new HOA board, elected in a landslide for transparency and accountability, turned the association into a true democracy. Monthly budget reports, competitive bidding for contractors, and homeowner approval for major expenses became standard. The playground Vivian's theft had delayed was finally built with recovered funds, named the Harold Carter Memorial Playground, honoring the man whose meticulous records had made justice possible. Josephine cried happy tears as she watched children play on equipment that corruption had stolen, but community action had restored. My cabin, meanwhile, became known as the place where the HOA revolution began. The irony wasn't lost on me. What started as personal grief therapy had sparked a federal investigation and changed how local governance worked. Rex Morrison and I turned our teamwork into a business, Boundary Solutions LLC, helping homeowners across Colorado fight property disputes and HOA abuse. Josephine became our unofficial partner, traveling to help other communities fight corruption. The ripple effects reached the state legislature, which passed the Pine Ridge Reform Act to strengthen HOA oversight and protect whistleblowers. The best part? Our monthly HOA meetings became real conversations about community needs instead of intimidation sessions. The annual Pine Ridge Community Festival, funded by recovered money, became a celebration of what neighbors can accomplish together. As I write this, I'm on my cabin porch, listening to children laughing in Harold Carter Memorial Playground. The coffee tastes different when you're drinking it in a place you built and defended. Melody would have loved this. She always believed that good people working together could overcome anything. My favorite decoration in the cabin is Josephine's handwritten note. Harold would be proud. Here's what I learned. Bullies count on you being tired, scared, or alone. But if you stand up, document everything, and unite with neighbors, even the most entrenched corruption can't survive. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your worst HOA story in the comments. And if you enjoy seeing bullies taken down by good old-fashioned community action, hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'll share how I helped an elderly neighbor get justice against a shady contractor. Because sometimes fighting back isn't just personal. It's about protecting those who can't fight for themselves. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh, shake your head, or feel inspired, hit that like button and share your thoughts below. We post new HOA chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week. Don't miss the next unbelievable story.